Elderly woman gives silent signal to waitress. She instantly calls 911. The next day, a mafia boss storms through the hospital doors, his tailored Italian suit unable to disguise the fury radiating from his powerful frame as he demands to see the waitress who saved his mother. The chandelier above table 7 cast a golden glow over the elderly woman's trembling hands as she desperately tapped her water glass 3 times. Her eyes darted toward the kitchen, fingers forming a subtle signal that most would miss, but the young waitress caught immediately. Sammy Porter's heart hammered against her ribs as she recognized the universal distress signal from her training. This wasn't just another wealthy patron being difficult at Le Ciel, New Jersey's most exclusive restaurant. The bruise partially concealed beneath the woman's expensive silk scarf told a more sinister story. The bruise peeked out like a dark secret beneath expensive silk, its mottled purple edges telling a story of violence carefully hidden from public view. Sammy had seen similar marks on her mother's wrist years ago, before she finally found the courage to leave Sammy's father behind in their small Midwestern town. Her manager had once warned the staff about wealthy patrons who expected discretion above all else. "Their problems aren't our business," he'd instructed during training, his voice lowered conspiratorially. "Some of these people could buy and sell this restaurant 10 times over. Remember your place." The elderly woman's eyes met Sammy's with unexpected clarity and determination beneath the fear. There was something familiar in that gaze. Not recognition, but a shared understanding that transcended their different worlds. A silent acknowledgement of feminine solidarity in the face of male aggression. With practiced calm that belied her racing thoughts, Sammy approached the table, pretending to refill water while whispering, "Bathroom in 3 minutes." She turned away from the imposing man beside the elderly woman, whose granite eyes registered nothing but cold indifference. Once in the service corridor, Sammy fumbled with her phone, dialing 911 with shaking fingers. "Emergency at Le Ciel Restaurant, 1579 Harborview Drive," she whispered urgently. "Elderly woman showing signs of distress, possible abuse situation, requires immediate assistance." Mrs. Cardini, the 70-year-old matriarch, locked herself in the bathroom stall, tears streaming down her lined face as she whispered her story to Sammy. "My son doesn't know what his business partner has been doing to me," she sobbed, revealing bruises blooming like dark flowers across her wrists. The police arrived within minutes, discreetly entering through the back entrance as Sammy had instructed. Officer Benson took one look at Mrs. Cardini's injuries and immediately placed the business associate under arrest, the restaurant patrons watching in stunned silence as handcuffs clicked shut. "You've made a terrible mistake," the man snarled at Sammy as he was led away, his voice dropping to a menacing whisper. "Do you have any idea who her son is? Your life as you know it is over, girl." The restaurant manager berated Sammy for causing a scene in their 5-star establishment, her job terminated on the spot despite her protests. "Rich people handle their problems differently," he hissed, thrusting her final paycheck into her trembling hands. As Sammy waited for the bus in the chilly autumn air, clutching her coat around her shoulders, she wondered if she'd done the right thing. The weight of uncertainty pressed against her chest as she considered her empty bank account and the rent due next week. She had no idea that across town, in the penthouse suite of the Grand Atlantic Hotel, Nicholas Cardini was receiving a phone call that would change both their lives forever. His mother's trembling voice revealed a year of silent suffering at the hands of his most trusted advisor. The rage that surged through Nicholas's powerful frame was unlike anything he had felt since taking over the family business at 22. Behind closed doors, he was known as the most dangerous man in New Jersey, a reputation built on calculated ruthlessness and iron control. "Find out everything about the waitress," he commanded his security chief, voice deadly calm despite the storm raging inside. "The one who helped my mother when I failed to see what was happening right under my nose." That night, Sammy dreamed of dark suits and whispered threats, unaware that her act of kindness had placed her directly in the path of one of the most powerful men in the criminal underworld. By morning, Nicholas Cardini would know everything about the waitress who had saved the only person he truly loved. Across town, Mrs. Cardini rested in a private hospital room, security posted at her door as doctors documented her injuries. "The waitress?" she murmured before drifting to sleep. "Make sure she's protected. She has a pure heart." Sammy woke to insistent knocking at her apartment door, sunlight streaming through the thin curtains of her modest studio. Wrapping herself in a threadbare robe, she peered through the peephole and froze at the sight of 2 broad-shouldered men in immaculate suits standing in her dingy hallway. "Miss Porter," the taller one said when she cracked open the door, security chain still in place. "Mr. Cardini requests your presence immediately. It concerns the events at Le Ciel restaurant yesterday evening." Her stomach dropped as the reality of her situation crystallized. The elderly woman wasn't just anyone's mother. She was the mother of Nicholas Cardini, the rumored king of New Jersey's underworld. Sammy had heard whispers from customers about his empire, but had dismissed them as exaggerations. The sleek black car waited at the curb, its tinted windows reflecting the dilapidated apartment building where Sammy had scraped by since moving to the city. The driver held the door with silent deference as she slid onto butter-soft leather seats, her worn jeans and faded t-shirt a stark contrast to the luxury surrounding her. Through the gates of an imposing estate they drove, manicured grounds stretching in all directions as the mansion came into view. Crystal-clear windows reflected the morning sun, the architecture a perfect blend of old-world elegance and modern fortress, much like the man who owned it. Nicholas Cardini stood at the window of his study, watching the car approach, his muscular frame outlined against the morning light. At 27, he commanded an empire built by his grandfather, his handsome features hardened by years of difficult decisions and ruthless business dealings. "She's nothing like I expected," he murmured to his right-hand man as he observed Sammy exit the vehicle, noting her simple beauty and the defiant tilt of her chin. Despite her obvious nervousness, she carried herself with quiet dignity that caught his attention immediately. The mansion's grounds stretched nearly to the horizon, meticulously maintained gardens giving way to dense forest that served as both natural boundary and privacy shield. Security cameras disguised as decorative elements tracked her movement up the winding driveway, their presence subtle but unmistakable to anyone paying attention. Nicholas had researched the waitress thoroughly, her background displayed across his desk in neat folders. Orphaned at 16, worked multiple jobs to put herself through community college, no criminal record beyond a parking ticket. What intrigued him most was what the files couldn't explain, the innate compassion that had led her to risk everything for a stranger. Morning sunlight streamed through stained glass windows, casting colorful patterns across antique furniture that had witnessed generations of Cardini family secrets. The mansion felt alive somehow, its grand hallways and hidden alcoves seemingly breathing with stories of past glories and private sins committed in the name of power. The heavy double doors opened before Sammy could knock, and she found herself ushered into a study lined with leather-bound books and antique weapons. Behind an imposing desk stood a man whose intense gaze caused her breath to catch, younger than she'd imagined, with dark hair and eyes that assessed her with unnerving precision. "Miss Porter," Nicholas said, his voice rich and controlled as he gestured toward a chair. "I believe I owe you my gratitude. My mother informed me of your intervention last night, an intervention that was apparently long overdue." Sammy perched on the edge of the chair, spine straight and hands folded in her lap. "I only did what anyone should do when they see someone in trouble," she replied, meeting his gaze directly despite the flutter of fear in her chest. "And yet no one else did," Nicholas observed, studying her with growing curiosity. "Not the other staff, not the patrons, not even me. I failed to see what was happening to my own mother for months." His vulnerability surprised Sammy, a crack in the formidable facade that made him suddenly human. "Sometimes those closest to us are the hardest to truly see," she offered softly, compassion overriding her fear. "Abusers are skilled at hiding their actions from everyone except their victims." Nicholas moved around the desk, reducing the physical barrier between them, his expression unreadable. "You lost your job because of your actions last night. That's unacceptable to me. I'd like to offer you a position here, as my mother's companion during her recovery." The proposition hung in the air between them, tempting in its simplicity yet complex in its implications. Working for the Cardini family comes with certain, he paused, choosing his words carefully, complications. "But you would have my personal protection and generous compensation." Sammy's mind raced with the implications. Working for a man whose business dealings were rumored to exist in shadowy legality at best, dangerous criminality at worst. Yet something in his eyes when he spoke of his mother reflected a depth of feeling that resonated with her own loneliness. "I'd like to speak with Mrs. Cardini first," she said finally, surprising both Nicholas and herself with her boldness. "If she's comfortable with the arrangement, then we can discuss terms." The hospital room where Eleanor Cardini recovered was more luxury suite than medical facility, filled with fresh flowers and staffed by private nurses. Her face brightened visibly when Sammy entered, extending her hand with genuine warmth despite the IV line attached to her wrist. "My savior," she said, her voice stronger than it had been the previous night. "Nicholas told me you might be joining our household. I couldn't ask for a better companion during my recovery." Over the next hour, the two women talked, finding unexpected common ground, despite the vast differences in their lives. Eleanor shared stories of raising Nicholas alone after her husband's death, while Sammy spoke of losing her parents young and making her own way through the world. What began as a temporary arrangement evolved quickly as Sammy moved into the guest house on the Cardini estate, her few belongings looking almost comical in the elegant space. The walk-in closet was mysteriously filled with clothes in her size, a discovery that left her both grateful and uneasy. Nicholas watched from a distance as Sammy integrated herself into their world, observing how she treated everyone from his mother to the groundskeepers with the same genuine respect. Her natural grace and adaptability intrigued him, so different from the calculated social climbing he was accustomed to. "She doesn't belong in your world, Nick," warned Paolo, his security chief and oldest friend, as they watched Sammy helping Eleanor through the garden. "She's too innocent, too honest for what we do." The truth of Paolo's assessment stung more than Nicholas cared to admit. "My mother adores her," he replied simply, avoiding the more complicated truth that he was increasingly drawn to Sammy's unaffected warmth. During family dinners, Nicholas found himself watching Sammy's expressive face, the way her eyes lit up when discussing books or music, her gentle teasing that somehow managed to make his mother laugh in ways he hadn't heard since before his father died. Eleanor had preserved her son's childhood bedroom exactly as it had been, a time capsule of innocence before responsibility had hardened him. "He built model airplanes," she confided to Sammy one afternoon, fingers tracing dusty propellers with tender remembrance. Before boardrooms and business deals, he dreamed of flying. The staff watched their interactions with poorly disguised curiosity, whispering when they thought no one could hear. "She won't last a month," predicted the head of household security, his weathered face set in skeptical lines. The last companion fled in tears after just 2 weeks. Rumors about Nicholas circulated constantly among the household staff, whispered stories of rivals who disappeared, businesses that mysteriously changed ownership overnight, judges and politicians who suddenly ruled in his favor. Sammy caught snippets of conversations that ceased the moment she entered a room, leaving her wondering exactly what kind of man she was growing to care for. One evening, returning late from a business meeting, Nicholas found Sammy alone in the library, curled in a window seat with a first edition Fitzgerald. The sight of her bathed in moonlight, completely absorbed in the story, stirred something protective and possessive in his chest. "Do you miss your old life?" he asked, startling her from her literary trance. "Waiting tables, living in that apartment, not being surrounded by men with guns discreetly watching your every move." Sammy marked her place in the book thoughtfully, considering his question. "I miss the simplicity sometimes," she admitted, "but not the loneliness. Your mother has become important to me, and this place, despite its complications, feels more like home than anywhere I've been in a long time." The vulnerability in her admission cracked something in Nicholas's carefully constructed armor. "There are things about me, about this family, that would frighten you if you knew," he said quietly, an unprecedented confession from a man who revealed nothing of himself to anyone. "I'm not as naive as you think," Sammy replied, meeting his intense gaze. "The whispers follow you everywhere, Nicholas. I've pieced together enough to understand that your business interests aren't entirely above board." "I understand what it means to live in darkness," Sammy whispered, the library's dim lighting concealing the tears threatening to spill. "Before Le Ciel, I was engaged to a man who nearly destroyed me. He took everything, my savings, my self-worth, even my trust in my own judgment." Nicholas felt an unfamiliar surge of protectiveness hearing the pain laced through her confession. The idea of someone hurting this woman who had saved his mother awakened a primal fury within him, his fingers tightening imperceptibly around his crystal tumbler. "His name was Brett," Sammy continued, eyes fixed on the moonlit gardens outside. "A charming lawyer who swept me off my feet, then gradually isolated me from friends, controlled our finances, and when I finally confronted him about the other women, he became violent. The silence between them held weight, shared understanding of betrayal, bridging their different worlds." Nicholas had never revealed his own wounds to anyone, yet found himself telling Sammy about his ex-wife Vanessa, whose ambition and cruelty had left scars invisible to all but him. "She married me for the power, the name, the lifestyle," he admitted, shadows dancing across his face. "When I discovered her affair with my business rival, The divorce was brutal. She threatened to expose family secrets to the authorities unless I paid her millions. Eleanor's illness had begun shortly after the divorce settlement, Nicholas explained, creating the perfect opportunity for his business partner Hank to gain her trust. He positioned himself as her confidant while I was distracted with legal battles, slowly poisoning her against me. The grandfather clock chimed midnight, neither of them moving to break the spell of shared confidences. "We make quite the pair," Sammy observed with a sad smile. "Both afraid to trust again, both wounded by people we believed loved us." Nicholas moved to sit beside her on the window seat, close enough that she could detect his subtle cologne. "The difference is that you retained your goodness despite what happened to you," he observed, his voice uncharacteristically gentle. "And you believe you haven't?" Sammy challenged, turning to face him fully. "I've seen how you care for your mother, how your staff respect rather than fear you, how you've protected me without expecting anything in return." Before he could respond, Nicholas's phone buzzed with an urgent alert. Security had intercepted a breach at the perimeter. "Stay here," he commanded, instantly transforming back into the powerful crime boss as he strode from the library, leaving Sammy alone with unspoken words hanging in the air. Security footage revealed a familiar face. Brett Donner, Sammy's ex-fiancé, attempting to scale the fence near the guest house. The calculated timing and professional equipment suggested this was no coincidence or crime of passion, raising alarm bells in Nicholas's mind. "How would he know she's here?" Paolo questioned as they reviewed the footage in the security room. "The only people who know about Miss Porter's new position are those within our immediate circle." The implication hung heavy in the air. Someone close to Nicholas had leaked information to Sammy's abusive ex. More disturbing still was the timing, coming immediately after Hank's arrest and pending trial for elder abuse against Eleanor Cardini. Dawn broke with Nicholas making a decision that would alter both their lives irrevocably. "Bring Sammy to my office," he instructed Paolo, his expression grave as he processed the connections forming in his mind. Brett, Vanessa, Hank, all potentially linked in a conspiracy targeting both Cardini power and Sammy's safety. Sammy entered his office, hair still damp from her morning shower. Concern etched across her features. "What happened last night?" "The security team wouldn't tell me anything," she asked, noticing the tension radiating from Nicholas's powerful frame. "Brett was here," Nicholas stated without preamble, watching as all color drained from Sammy's face. "My security team intercepted him attempting to reach your quarters with a knife and restraints in his possession." Sammy sank into the leather chair, trembling fingers pressing against her lips. "How did he find me? I changed my phone number, my email, even moved across the city to escape him," she whispered, the terror in her voice igniting Nicholas's protective instincts. "I believe he's working with my enemies," Nicholas explained, laying out surveillance photos showing Brett meeting with Vanessa just days ago. "My ex-wife has been observed with Hank regularly over the past 6 months, which cannot be coincidental." The pieces aligned with terrifying clarity. Hank had abused Eleanor while feeding information to Vanessa, who used Brett to target Sammy once she became close to the Cardini family. The coordinated attack on both Nicholas's personal and professional worlds was sophisticated and deeply personal. "I won't let him hurt you," Nicholas promised, crossing the room to kneel before her chair, taking her cold hands in his warm ones. "But I need you to understand that protecting you might require measures that cross lines you never imagined crossing." Something shifted between them in that moment, a line blurring as Nicholas reached up to brush a tear from her cheek. "I've spent my life in shadows," he murmured, "but you've brought light into this house, into my mother's life, into mine." The security alarm shattered the moment, Paolo bursting through the door with news that sent ice through Nicholas's veins. "Boss, it's your mother. The hospital just called. Someone tampered with her medication during the night shift." The hospital corridor seemed endless as Nicholas strode toward the private wing, Sammy running to keep pace with his longer strides. Eleanor lay pale against white sheets, doctors assuring them they'd caught the tampering in time. But the message was clear. Nowhere was truly safe. "This ends today," Nicholas declared, the dangerous edge in his voice causing nearby nurses to step back instinctively. "Paolo, initiate protocol blackout. I want every Cardini property locked down, every associate accounted for, and full surveillance on Vanessa, Hank, and this Brett character." Sammy witnessed a transformation as Nicholas issued commands, glimpsing for the first time the man who controlled New Jersey's underworld. Yet rather than fear, she felt an unexpected sense of security knowing his formidable power now stood between her and those who wished her harm. Back at the mansion, Nicholas led Sammy to a hidden room behind his study, walls lined with monitors displaying security feeds from across the city. "This is Command Central," he explained, voice tight with controlled rage. "And from here, we'll draw them out while keeping you and my mother safe." The plan formed quickly, a deliberate leak suggesting Eleanor was being moved to a remote facility, creating an opportunity for their enemies to make a move. "You'll stay here where I can protect you," Nicholas insisted, but Sammy's expression hardened with newfound resolve. "I'm tired of hiding from Brett. Tired of being a victim," she stated firmly, chin raised in defiance. "Use me as bait. Let them think I'll be accompanying Eleanor during the transfer. Draw them out completely." Nicholas's refusal was immediate and vehement, the idea of deliberately placing Sammy in danger unthinkable. Their argument escalated until they stood toe-to-toe, his commanding presence matched by her stubborn determination, tension crackling in the air between them. "Why do you care so much what happens to me?" Sammy demanded, frustration breaking her voice. "I'm just a waitress who happened to help your mother. Why risk your operation to protect me?" "Because I'm falling in love with you," Nicholas admitted, the words escaping before he could contain them. The confession hung in the air between them, raw and unplanned, surprising them both with its intensity and truth. Sammy's eyes widened, her breath catching as Nicholas stepped closer, one hand gently cupping her cheek. "Since the moment you stood up to me in my own study, demanding to speak with my mother first before accepting my offer, you've fascinated me," he continued, voice rough with emotion. The kiss was inevitable, months of tension dissolving as his lips met hers with gentle passion that quickly blazed into something more urgent. Sammy's arms wound around his neck, years of guarding her heart forgotten in the overwhelming certainty that this man, despite his dangerous world, would never hurt her. "This complicates everything," Nicholas murmured against her temple later, holding her close in the private sanctuary of his study. "My enemies will target you even more ruthlessly if they discover what you mean to me." The following morning brought news that shattered their fragile bubble of newfound happiness. Vanessa had requested a meeting with Nicholas, claiming to have information about the attacks on Eleanor. "It's obviously a trap," Paolo warned, but Nicholas recognized the opportunity to confront one piece of the conspiracy directly. "I'm coming with you," Sammy insisted, her determination matching his own. "She needs to see that I'm not afraid, that we're united against whatever scheme she's concocted with Brett and Hank." The upscale restaurant Vanessa chose for the meeting buzzed with lunchtime patrons, providing the public setting she believed would protect her from Nicholas's retribution. Her perfectly manicured hand froze midair, champagne glass suspended when she spotted Sammy entering beside Nicholas, their entwined fingers sending a clear message. "How unexpected," Vanessa purred, recovering quickly as they joined her at the table. "I arranged to meet my ex-husband, not his latest charity case," she added, venom thinly disguised behind a practiced smile. Nicholas remained coolly professional, ignoring the barb as he stated their purpose directly. "You claim to have information about the attempts on my mother's life and the harassment of Miss Porter," he reminded her, eyes never leaving Vanessa's perfectly composed face. "Information comes at a price, darling," Vanessa replied, red lips curving into a calculating smile. $10 million wired to my offshore account, and I'll tell you exactly who orchestrated everything, including who in your inner circle has been feeding information to your enemies." The implication of a traitor among his most trusted associates sent a cold shiver down Nicholas's spine. "You expect me to believe anything you say?" he challenged, maintaining his composure despite the internal alarm bells ringing loudly. "Check your phone," Vanessa suggested, sipping her champagne with practiced elegance. "I've sent a sample of what I possess, just enough to prove I'm not bluffing." The photo on Nicholas's screen showed Paolo meeting with Hank just yesterday, handshakes and smiles contradicting the supposed enmity between the Cardini operation and the man who had abused Eleanor. The timestamp and location details left little room for misinterpretation or claims of manipulation. Sammy felt Nicholas stiffen beside her, his hand gripping hers tighter as he processed the apparent betrayal by his oldest friend and most trusted security chief. "Paolo has been with me since we were children," he murmured, disbelief coloring his voice. "Everyone has a price," Vanessa stated coldly, leaning forward to deliver her ultimatum. $10 million by midnight, or I take everything I have to the federal authorities. Your operation dismantled, your mother's abuser walking free on technicalities, and your new girlfriend returned to the loving arms of her fiancé, who still technically has a valid engagement contract with her. Nicholas's expression remained impassive, but Sammy felt the tremor in his hand, the only outward sign of the rage and calculation happening behind his composed facade. "You'll have your answer by 7 tonight," he promised, rising from the table with fluid grace that belied the turmoil within. Outside the restaurant, Sammy clutched Nicholas's arm, her thoughts racing wildly. "That photo of Paolo can't be real. He practically raised you," she whispered, searching his face for reassurance that wasn't there. The revelation of betrayal by his most trusted confidant had shattered something fundamental in Nicholas's world. The car ride back to the estate passed in tense silence. Nicholas's jaw clenched so tightly that Sammy feared for his teeth. His phone buzzed constantly with updates from his network, each message darkening his expression further as the web of betrayal expanded before them. At the mansion, Nicholas instructed his most trusted guards to discreetly monitor Paolo while maintaining normal operations. "We need to know how deep this goes before we make our move," he explained, pacing the secure room with predatory grace, fingers tapping against the holstered gun at his side. Sammy watched him transform before her eyes, the tender man from the library receding behind the calculating crime boss. "What's your plan?" she asked, refusing to be sidelined despite his protective instincts, her own determination matching his intensity. "I'm meeting with Paolo tonight to discuss security updates. Standard procedure after a threat," Nicholas explained, eyes flickering to the wall of monitors. "If he's loyal, he'll welcome increased measures. If not, his reaction will tell us everything we need to know." Eleanor's voice came through the intercom unexpectedly, requesting Sammy's presence in her suite. "Go to her," Nicholas urged, pressing a soft kiss to Sammy's forehead. "Let her think everything is normal while I handle this situation." In Eleanor's elegant rooms, the elderly woman seemed remarkably improved, her color better as she patted the space beside her on the chaise lounge. "My son looks at you the way his father once looked at me," she observed with a knowing smile that transformed her lined face into something youthful and mischievous. "We're facing some complications," Sammy admitted carefully, unwilling to worry the recovering woman but needing some motherly wisdom. "People from both our pasts trying to tear us apart when we've barely had a chance to begin." Eleanor's laugh was surprisingly strong, her eyes sparkling with unexpected mischief. "My dear, I wasn't always the respectable matriarch you see now. In my day, I helped build this empire alongside my husband. I know a thing or two about handling threats to those I love." Their conversation was interrupted by the mansion's security alarm blaring through every room, red emergency lights bathing the elegant decor in crimson warning. Guards burst in, surrounding Eleanor protectively as Sammy's heart threatened to pound out of her chest, instinctively reaching for the older woman's hand. "Stay with Mrs. Cardini," the lead guard instructed Sammy tersely, positioning men at all entrances. "The perimeter has been breached. Multiple armed intruders approaching the main house from the east gardens." Through the window, Sammy spotted figures moving across the darkened grounds, the tactical precision of their approach suggesting professional training. "Where's Nicholas?" she demanded, terror clawing at her throat as gunfire erupted from the east wing where his office was located. Paolo's voice crackled through the security radio, his tone unnervingly calm. "Target secured in the panic room," he reported, referring to Nicholas according to protocol. "Proceeding with elimination of secondary threats according to Contingency Plan Bravo." "He's lying," Sammy whispered, intuition screaming that something was terribly wrong. Nicholas would never go to the panic room without ensuring his mother was safe first. "It's against everything I know about him." Eleanor gripped Sammy's hand with surprising strength, her eyes clear and focused. "The service tunnels," she whispered urgently, pulling Sammy toward an ornate bookcase that concealed a hidden passage. "We need to get to my son before Paolo does." The narrow stone passage felt endless, as Sammy and Eleanor hurried through the underground network that connected various parts of the estate. "My husband built these tunnels during Prohibition," Eleanor explained between labored breaths, her determination belying her frail appearance. They emerged into Nicholas's private study, just as Paolo entered through the main door, gun raised and expression cold. "Mrs. Cardini, you shouldn't be out of your secure room," he said smoothly, eyes calculating as they shifted between the two women. "Where is my son, Paolo?" Eleanor demanded, her aristocratic bearing making her seem taller, despite her diminutive frame. "After 30 years of loyalty, you choose money over family? How disappointing." Paolo's laugh held no warmth as he gestured with his weapon. "The Cardini Empire is crumbling from within. Your son is too soft for this business. The new alliance I've forged with Vanessa and her connections will modernize our operations." Sammy inched toward the desk, remembering Nicholas mentioning a weapon stored in the bottom drawer. You mean you'll destroy everything the Cardinis built and replace it with whatever suits your ambition? She challenged, deliberately drawing Paolo's attention. The waitress who thinks she understands our world? Paolo sneered, taking a step toward Sammy. You're just a temporary distraction. Nicholas always returns to Vanessa eventually. Their connection runs deeper than you could possibly understand. The gunshot echoed deafeningly in the confined space, but it wasn't Paolo who fired. Nicholas stood in the doorway connecting to the library, smoking gun steady in his hand as Paolo crumpled to the floor clutching his shoulder, weapon skittering across polished hardwood. I wanted to believe Vanessa was lying about you, Nicholas said quietly, voice laden with grief as he approached his former friend. I gave you every opportunity tonight to prove your loyalty, and you failed each test. The security team flooded in, securing Paolo as Nicholas crossed to embrace his mother and Sammy, relief evident in every line of his powerful frame. When the alarm sounded and you weren't in your rooms, he murmured against Sammy's hair. I thought I'd lost you both. The aftermath unfolded over hours that blurred together. Police statements carefully crafted to protect the family, while ensuring Paolo and his conspirators faced justice. Vanessa was apprehended trying to flee the country, her offshore accounts frozen on suspicion of criminal conspiracy. Brett was discovered among the hired mercenaries who had breached the estate grounds, his pathetic attempts to claim ignorance falling apart under interrogation. He confessed to stalking you for months, Nicholas told Sammy gently, as dawn broke over the horizon, bathing his office in golden light. Sammy sat beside Eleanor on the leather couch, both women exhausted but refusing to rest until they knew everything. What happens now? Sammy asked, fingers intertwined with Nicholas's as he crouched before them, his usual imposing presence softened by vulnerability. Rebuilding, Nicholas answered simply, looking between the two women who had risked everything to save him. Not just the business, but us. A family bound by choice rather than blood or obligation. Eleanor smiled, patting her son's cheek affectionately. It's time for me to step back and let you lead. Not just the business, but your own life. The empire needs new vision, and your heart has chosen wisely. The following weeks saw sweeping changes throughout the Cardini organization, with Nicholas dismantling corrupt elements and establishing legitimate business fronts that would eventually transform his inheritance into something he could proudly pass on. The criminal aspects would diminish gradually, a long-term plan for redemption. Sammy discovered unexpected talents as she helped Nicholas navigate these changes, her outsider perspective offering fresh insights into operations that had stagnated under old leadership. You see possibilities where we've only seen limitations, Nicholas observed one night as they reviewed plans for a charitable foundation in Eleanor's name. The foundation's first initiative focused on supporting survivors of domestic violence, providing safe housing and legal assistance that protected women regardless of their socioeconomic status. Eleanor took particular satisfaction in designing these programs, her personal experience informing every detail with a depth of understanding no consultant could match. Nicholas discovered an unexpected talent for legitimate business, his strategic mind and force of personality proving just as effective in boardrooms as they had been in backroom dealings. You've always had this in you, Sammy told him one night, curled against his side as they reviewed quarterly reports. The power to build rather than intimidate. The transition wasn't without resistance. Old associates questioned his new direction, some even attempting to sabotage his legitimate ventures through underhanded tactics. These challenges only strengthened Nicholas's resolve, each obstacle overcome bringing him closer to the man he wanted to be for Sammy and his mother. 6 months after the night that had nearly destroyed them, Nicholas stood at the window of his office, watching Sammy teach his mother how to plant roses in the garden below. The sight of the two women laughing together in the sunshine filled him with a contentment he'd never imagined possible. Their vows, written in secret late nights and whispered practices, reflected the extraordinary journey that had brought them together. From a signal for help to a promise of forever, Sammy began, voice steady, despite the tears gathering in her eyes. You saved me by allowing me to save you. Local newspapers covered the wedding with breathless speculation, society columnists marveling at the mysterious waitress who had captured the heart of New Jersey's most eligible bachelor. What they couldn't know was how completely Sammy had transformed the Cardini legacy, shifting it from fear toward respect, built on genuine community investment. The honeymoon took them to the Italian countryside where the Cardini family had originated generations ago before immigrating to America. In a small village among rolling hills, Nicholas showed Sammy the humble stone cottage where his grandfather was born, long before ambition and opportunity had forged their family into something more powerful. and dangerous. The transformation of the Cardini Empire progressed steadily. Criminal operations replaced by legitimate businesses that employed former gang members, offering second chances that reflected Nicholas's own journey. His reputation remained fearsome, but increasingly for his ruthless business acumen rather than violence. Vanessa and Hank faced federal charges that would keep them imprisoned for decades, their attempted takeover exposing financial crimes that stretched back years. Brett had accepted a plea deal, confessing to his role in the conspiracy and agreeing to never contact Sammy again in exchange for a reduced sentence. Eleanor thrived in her new role as Foundation chairwoman, her experience and connections opening doors that had previously remained closed to the Cardini name. "My mother was born for philanthropy," Nicholas commented to Sammy as they watched Eleanor charm potential donors at a fundraising gala. The question had been burning in Nicholas's mind for weeks, the small velvet box a constant presence in his pocket as he waited for the perfect moment. Tonight, watching Sammy's easy confidence as she navigated the high society event, he knew it had arrived. "I need some air," Sammy whispered during a break in the music, leading Nicholas to the garden terrace where stars sparkled overhead, like diamonds scattered across black velvet. The transformation from waitress to his partner had been seamless, her innate grace making her belong in any setting. Nicholas took both her hands in his, the powerful man suddenly nervous as a schoolboy. "When you first entered my life, saving my mother with nothing but courage and compassion, I thought you were a temporary blessing," he began, voice roughened with emotion. "You've become so much more, my conscience when I falter, my strength when I doubt, my light in a world that was nothing but shadows before you," he continued, dropping to one knee and producing the antique ring that had once belonged to his grandmother. Sammy's eyes filled with tears as Nicholas asked the question that would bind their lives together forever. "Yes," she whispered, as he slipped the ring onto her finger, the delicate diamond catching starlight and transforming it into rainbow promises. The wedding took place in spring, when the estate gardens burst with new life that mirrored the renewal of the Cardini family. Eleanor, resplendent in pale blue silk, beamed as she witnessed her son's happiness, privately thanking the universe for the waitress whose kindness had saved them all. "I never thought I'd find this," Sammy confessed to Nicholas during their first dance, the elegant ballroom filled with carefully vetted guests who represented their new beginning. "After Brett, I believed love was just another weapon to control and hurt." Nicholas pulled her closer, his formidable presence now her sanctuary rather than a threat. "And I never believed I deserved redemption, until you showed me that even the darkest parts of ourselves can be transformed by love," he murmured against her temple. A year to the day after Sammy had first noticed Eleanor's distress signal in the restaurant, she stood in the hospital nursery window beside Nicholas, both gazing in wonder at their newborn daughter. "She has your eyes," Nicholas whispered, arm wrapped protectively around Sammy's shoulders. "And your determination," Sammy replied with a tired smile, thinking of the 14 hours of labor during which she'd refused all pain medication, determined to bring their daughter into the world on her own terms. "She's going to be unstoppable." Eleanor joined them, tears glistening in her eyes as she beheld her granddaughter. "The future of our family," she said softly, placing a hand on Nicholas's shoulder. "Built on love rather than fear, protection rather than power." Nicholas thought of the journey that had brought them to this moment, from a desperate signal in a restaurant to the creation of a new life. The path had been dangerous and painful, but standing between the two women who had saved him in different ways, he knew every step had been necessary. "What shall we name her?" Sammy asked, leaning into Nicholas's embrace as fatigue and joy battled within her. The tiny life they'd created together represented everything they'd fought for, a future unburdened by the shadows of their pasts. Nicholas considered, then smiled. "Hope," he decided, the name embodying everything their daughter represented, the possibility of redemption, the promise of tomorrow, and the unbreakable power of love to transform even the darkest of legacies into something beautiful. Thank you all for watching this beautiful story. Let us know in the comments where you're tuning in from today. If you enjoyed this tale of courage, redemption, and unexpected love, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video with someone who needs a reminder that second chances are always possible. Your support helps us continue bringing these stories to life.